Hello, my lovely students. I'm just going to start by saying that I miss you and that I read all of your notes to me last Friday. Thank you so much for writing me. A lot of you asked how I was doing. And overall, I'm doing okay. Everyone's healthy at my house. The girls are good. My biggest problem is that I miss you guys, and I keep saying this to everyone, but it's the truth. The best part about teaching is my students. And so not being around you guys just leaves me with all the other stuff that's like fine, but I just really would rather be in the classroom with you guys. So we're going to talk today about the subjunctive, and I'll explain everything. Just a couple of things to preface the lesson. One, I'm going to talk for a long time and you're going to get tired of my voice, and I'm sorry. Two, this is one of the hardest things to learn in Spanish. It's very challenging for, I even will still make mistakes with this. Tense, we're going to call it a tense. But I want you guys to think of it as like, okay, the subjunctive is this big, hard thing in Spanish, and we are literally just going to make the tiniest dent. Okay, so you're not going to be experts on every use of it in the Spanish language, but don't be overwhelmed by it. It does require some concentration, and it requires some effort. Usually we're all together, and it's kind of like our big last hurrah for the end of the year is learning this big, hard thing together. So now we're going to have to do it online. Which is tough, but we can do it, okay? So it's called the subjunctive, and in Spanish, that translates to el subjuntivo. What is it? So we're just going to think of it as a new tense. It's not technically a tense, linguistically speaking, but that's just what we're going to call it. So just like this year, we've learned the imperfect, we've learned the perfect, we've practiced the preterite, we've practiced the present progressive, all these things. These are all tenses and different conjugations for the verb. So the two big things we have to talk about are when we use it and how we conjugate the verb in this new subjunctive tense. So that's what we're going to go through now. The reason it's so hard for so many Spanish learners to learn the subjunctive is that we don't have an English equivalent. So with the imperfect, for example, I said to you guys, hey, you're going to use the imperfect when in English you want to say that you used to do something, right? And that was your clue that you needed to use it, right? I don't have that. I don't have that to give to you in English. I can't say, oh, when you say this in English, you're going to use this tense. So we're just going to kind of talk about when you would use it and give lots of examples and do lots of practice. So like I said, it's this big giant thing. The little tiny dent we're going to make in this learning of the subjunctive is we're going to use it in sentences with a very specific structure. And in the sentences, you're going to see two different people or two different groups of people. And the first group is trying to influence the actions of the second group. That might not make sense. Give me a few minutes and some examples, and you'll see what I mean. The structure that I was referring to, all of the sentences that we are going to use the subjunctive in are going to have this same structure. So you can see it there on the slide, but you're going to have a person or a group of people, that's the first person, and then a verb, right? You're going to have the word que, which in Spanish means that, and then a different person with another verb, right? So it has two clauses and the word que in the middle, and que in Spanish, just a reminder, means that. So here's an example to kind of show you what I mean. An English sentence that has this structure that we would use, we'll use subjunctive when we translate this sentence to Spanish, is my doctor, so that's the first person, recommends, first verb, that, which is the que, I, different person, sleep, second verb, and then just like whatever the rest of the sentence is, 8 hours every night. Okay, so if you look at that, you can see two different people, two verbs, the word that in the middle. And what's the doctor trying to do? They're trying to influence my actions, right? The doctor recommends that I sleep. The doctor wants me to sleep. Okay, so that's the use of the subjunctive here. All right, so this is really important. So look at that sentence, and you have recommends and sleep. Those are the two verbs. So when we translate this sentence to Spanish, the first verb in this sentence is recommends is going to just be in the regular present tense that we've always used. The second verb, sleep, the one that comes after that, okay, is going to be conjugated in this new subjunctive tense. We haven't talked about the conjugations yet. We're just looking at when we would use it. Okay. So en español, let's go ahead and translate it so you can see it in Spanish. Mi médico recomienda que yo duerma 8 horas cada noche. So look at recomendar. That's a new verb, I think, from this chapter. Recomendar. It's a stem changer. It's E to IE, so you can see that stem change there. And it's conjugated in the present tense. It's an AR verb, and it has an A ending for mi médico. Mi médico recomienda que. Yo, now look at dormir. Dormir is in the subjunctive. Duerma. It's not duermo, it's duerma. Okay? So, that example that I just gave, which, like I said, duermas in the subjunctive, do you recognize anything? All right, so you might have forgotten about everything we did before break, but if you didn't, we practiced for 4 weeks the usted and ustedes commands and the -2 commands. And the big rule with those was opposite endings. Well, guess what? Those conjugations are also the subjunctive, right? So what we talked about before with the yo form, drop the o, opposite ending, that's the subjunctive. Which kind of makes sense to me, right? Because commands are in the subjunctive because you're you're influencing somebody's actions. This is the same thing. You're kind of telling a command like indirectly in these sentences. So opposite ending, yo form, drop the o, opposite ending, that's the same rule we're going to stick with for the subjunctive, the same rule that we did with ustedes, usted, and -2 commands. Okay, so the example there is dormir. It's an IR verb, but it doesn't have an E or an O, it has an A. All right, so let's just look at some regular verbs, like nothing funny. Bailar. Oh, I see a mistake. Hang on. I'm going to fix it as I'm recording this. See that? Uh-oh, I made a mistake. Okay, there we go. Fixed it. All right, so let's look at the conjugations of bailar. So the yo form is baile. It's an AR verb. So remember, the AR opposite endings all start with an E. Baile, bailes, baile, bailemos, bailes, bailen. Opposite endings. Right? Now look at the yo in the he, she form, the I in the he, she form. Those are both baile. So it's really important in this tense, just like we did with the imperfect, it's important to use the subject because sometimes it could say baile and it could be yo or he or she or we don't know who it is. So it's important to use the subject. All right, so we'll kind of look at that verb. All right, let's look at comer. Comer. So you've got coma, comas, coma, comamos, comais, coma. So it's kind of like the AR verb endings, except the yo form is not with an O, it's an A. So you always want to remember the yo form and the usted el form are the same. Okay, so those are two easy verbs with no irregularities. Let's just look quickly at a stem changing verb. So you are going to use the opposite ending. Okay, so you see that. It's an AR verb, but you've got ES, E, Yeah, animals, ace, and, but look at the stem change. You're only stem changing in the shoe, okay? All right, let's keep going. All right, so that is all we are going to cover for conjugation so far. So far, all you guys are responsible for are regular verbs. Do this, like bailar, comer, and stem changers. But the key is yo form, drop the O, opposite ending. Okay. Now that doesn't really work with the nosotros and vosotros forms, but just remember, you're only going to stem change in the shoe. Okay. Now, as we move on, we'll talk about the cargarzar, we'll talk about the yo-go, we'll talk about all those 6, I don't know if you guys remember, like those 6 irregular types of verbs when we did the commands. Those are going to be the same 6 types of irregular verbs for these, but for now, we're just going to focus on the regular verbs and the stem changers. Okay, I don't want to overload you. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about how to conjugate in the subjunctive. So remember, when I say that, I'm talking about the second verb there. Okay, we're not talking about the first verb. The first verb is just in the present tense. So mi médico recomienda, present tense, que yo duerma, subjunctive tense. Okay, now, the first verb in this sentence, so this same example we've been looking at, it triggers the use of the subjunctive in the second sentence. Okay? So this recomendar plus que, if you ever see recomendar plus the word que, you're going to use the subjunctive afterwards, always, 100% of the time. And we're going to use that word triggers. It triggers the use of the subjunctive. There are 10 verbs that we are going to learn that, when used in this type of sentence, so with this structure, will also trigger the subjunctive in the second verb. Okay, we call them triggers because of this. So these 10 verbs, like when I'm talking about them, I'll be like, oh, it's a trigger, a subjunctive trigger. That means the verb that I'm talking about is conjugated in the present, but if it's used with a K, the next verb is going to be in the subjunctive. So I know I sound like a broken record here, but it's really important to remember. All right, so let's look at the verbs that you guys are going to be responsible for. There are like 100 verbs. I don't know. We're going to do 10. Okay, so insistir en que, permitir que, prohibir que, recomendar que, pedir que, necesitar que, preferir que, querer que, sugerir que, y esperar que. We're going to call those our 10 triggers that you guys are responsible for. Now, on the next slide, I'll go explicitly through what those mean, what they translate to in English. But notice I went ahead and put the K attached to the end of them because they're not going to use the subjunctive without that K. So I just added it there. All right, so here's what they mean. Insistir en que is to insist that. So an example in English would be, you know, I insist that Noelia go to bed early. Okay, I insist, present tense, that Noelia, so that's a different person, there always has to be 2 people, Noelia, go to bed early. Okay, so that second verb, go to bed, would be in the subjunctive. Permitir que, to allow that. My parents, so the other thing to remember is they don't always translate very well to English, but it's how you would say it in Spanish. Like in English, I would just say like, you know, the BMV doesn't allow drivers to drive with expired tags or something. I don't know. But in Spanish, it would be the BMV doesn't allow that drivers drive without or with expired tags. Okay, so sometimes you gotta kind of reword it when you're thinking of how it would be in Spanish. Forbid that or to prohibit that. So if we look at our example of the, we're in this COVID-19 pandemic, you could say the government forbids or prohibits that people leave their house. Okay, so prohibit or forbid would be in the present tense, leave their house would be in the subjunctive tense. Recomendar que, so we already saw an example with that. Pedir que is to ask that somebody do something. My mom asks that I respect her. I don't know. My mom asks that, present tense. I respect her, subjunctive tense. To need. So again, it doesn't translate exactly to English, right? We talked about that. There's not a direct English equivalent, but in Spanish, you would say you need that somebody do something. In English, I would say, hey, I need you to come with me. In Spanish, I would say, I need that you come with me. To need, present tense. You come, subjunctive tense. Prefer that. My boss prefers that I work late, something. My boss prefers that, present tense. I work late, subjunctive. Want that. Again, in English, I would just say, hey, she wants me to call her. But in Spanish, I would say, she wants that I call her. Wants that, present tense. I call her, subjunctive tense. Suggest that. The CDC suggests that we wear masks. Suggest that, present tense. We wear masks, subjunctive tense. Esperar que is to hope that something happens. So I hope you have a good day. I hope that you have a good day. I hope that, present tense. You have a good day, subjunctive tense. Esperar, I know we learned that as to wait. It does mean that, but it also means to hope or to expect. But here we're going to use it as to hope. Okay, so remember, these will be conjugated in the present and will trigger the use of the subjunctive in the second verb. I've linked on here, if you click on these links on the slideshow, I've linked the conjugations of these verbs, but the ones with the asterisks are stem changers. So that's just a little reminder there. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. I know that was a lot. Your job today is just listen to this video, and then tomorrow we'll do some practice and recognition of the tense and that kind of thing. Okay. So feel free to go back through this. You don't have to necessarily listen to me again, but go back through this, look at the example, make sure you're kind of starting to understand what this is. All right? All right, I miss you guys. Let's see if I can figure out how to stop this. And okay, bye-bye.